Hey everyone, ready to dive deep into the world of the Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn Part 1? Released on November 18, 2011. This film has sparked endless discussions, and today, we're uncovering every thrilling detail. If you enjoy this deep dive, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps us grow. And for more incredible movie explorations and hidden gems, subscribe to the channel. Now, let's unravel the magic behind this cinematic masterpiece. On November 18, 2011, The Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn Part 1 arrived in theaters like a thunderclap across a pop culture landscape already saturated with vampire obsession, fan rivalries, and the unrelenting storm of Team Edward versus Team Jacob. But this time, the stakes were different. This wasn't just another chapter in a love triangle. It was the beginning of the end. A darker, more mature evolution of a saga that had captured the hearts and imaginations of millions. What began as a teenage girl falling in love with a pale, brooding vampire in a rainy Washington town had transformed into something far more ambitious, grander in scale, deeper in emotional gravity, and unapologetically haunting. There's something undeniably magnetic about Breaking Dawn Part 1. Maybe it's the long-awaited culmination of Bella and Edward's love story, or the surreal fantasy of a vampire wedding surrounded by ethereal forest scenery and glimmering white blossoms. Maybe it's the way the film dares to pivot into body horror and moral ambiguity, blurring the lines between devotion and destruction. What makes this installment extraordinary isn't just its romance or mythology. It's the way it leans into emotional discomfort, demanding its audience grow up with its characters. We're no longer watching wide-eyed high schoolers fumble through supernatural crushes. This is about irreversible decisions, mortality, loyalty, and the steep price of becoming something new. From its opening moments, the film signals a tonal shift. Bella, played with a quiet, solemn strength by Kristen Stewart, is preparing for a wedding she's accepted with her whole heart, but not without fear. The voiceovers are gone. There's no inner monologue to soften the anxiety. All we have is her face, her trembling fingers, and the weight of what she's chosen. And opposite her, Edward Cullen, Robert Pattinson's immortal, guilt-ridden husband-to-be, remains a figure of quiet torment, haunted by the bloodshed of his past and terrified of what the future might cost Bella. The entire Cullen clan stands at the edge of a new chapter, and though the world around them glitters with wedding magic and honeymoon fantasy, there's an ever-present sense that nothing will be the same. The wedding itself is a fantasy pulled from the pages of every fan's dream. The setting is impossibly perfect. A forest transformed into a cathedral of flowers and light, guests in flowing attire, whispers of music, and a glowing bride in a dress designed by none other than Carolina Herrera. When Bella walks down that aisle, we aren't just watching her walk toward Edward. We're watching her walk away from her humanity. The moment she says, "I do," the story officially crosses a threshold. This isn't just romance anymore. It's tragedy. It's transformation. And it's irreversible. Then comes the honeymoon in Brazil, and with it, a brief reprieve from the storm ahead. The scenes on Isle Esme are slow, sensual, and soaked in longing. The newlyweds swim under moonlight, laugh for the first time in what feels like years, and discover the awkward, uncertain rhythms of intimacy. It's raw, sometimes clumsy, and all the more real for it. But even here, the shadows follow. Bella's pregnancy comes as a thunderbolt, sudden, impossible, and deeply terrifying. What should have been the next step in their love becomes a ticking time bomb. From here, the film takes a stunning left turn, descending into psychological horror and slow-burning dread. Bella's body becomes the battlefield between life and death, between love and obsession. As her child grows at an impossible rate, her body withers. Her cheeks hollow out, her spine curves, her skin grows pale and papery. Kristen Stewart's performance here is transformative. She's not just acting ill. She becomes consumed by fragility, her every movement an echo of something slipping away. It's a disturbing sight, and the film doesn't flinch. Director Bill Condon commits to the grotesque elegance of it all, wrapping every scene in a thick, sterile silence that feels like mourning before death has even arrived. Edward's reaction is nothing short of devastating. Robert Pattinson plays him as a man unraveling. His agony silent, his rage turned inward. This was never what he wanted. He didn't want Bella to suffer. He didn't want to create a child that might kill her. And now he's forced to stand by, powerless, as the woman he loves fades before his eyes. Yet Bella remains resolute. She believes in this child, in this life, even as it drains hers. And strangely, she finds an unlikely ally in Rosalie, Nikki Reed's long resentful vampire, whose pain over never having a child herself now fuels a fierce, almost fanatical protectiveness over Bella and the unborn baby. And then there's Jacob. This film gives Taylor Lautner his most emotionally complex arc yet. No longer just the angry wolf in love with a taken girl, Jacob is forced to confront his own limitations, his rage, and ultimately, his purpose. When he breaks from Sam's wolf pack to protect Bella, it's more than rebellion. It's the act of a young man defining his own values, finding a path that isn't dictated by the instincts of his species or the ache of unrequited love. His scenes with Bella are tender, tense, and bittersweet. And when the child arrives, and Jacob imprints on the newborn Renesmee, the entire narrative is turned on its head. Yes, the imprinting, perhaps the most controversial moment in the entire series. But beneath its initial strangeness lies something deeply mythological. A bond not of romance, but of destiny, of protection. It's a moment that reframes Jacob's journey, giving him a reason for all his pain, all his longing. And it sets the stage for a new family dynamic that will shape the final chapter to come. The birth scene itself is the climax of the film's horror elements. A harrowing, bloody sequence shot like a war zone in a surgical suite. The screams are deafening, the visuals relentless. Bella's body breaks apart, literally, as the child is born. Edward is frantic, tearing open her chest with teeth and pumping venom into her heart in a desperate attempt to save her. It's chaos, heartbreak, and dark magic all at once. And then silence. The camera lingers on Bella's lifeless face. The score fades. It's over. Or is it? The transformation that follows is ethereal. Her skin glows, her hair smooths, her body heals. And finally, in a single haunting moment, her eyes open bright, crimson red. Bella is no longer Bella. She's something else now. Something immortal. And just like that, Breaking Dawn Part 1 ends not with resolution but with rebirth. It's a cliffhanger that promises power, vengeance, and an entirely new identity for a character we thought we knew. What makes this film linger long after the credits roll isn't just its story or visuals. It's the way it matured with its audience. The fans who fell in love with Twilight in 2008 had grown up by 2011, and so had the franchise. The themes are heavier now: death, sacrifice, parenthood, agency, and consequence. It's no longer a fairy tale, it's a reckoning. Behind the scenes, the production pushed limits. Kristen Stewart reportedly went through hours of makeup to portray Bella's decline, aided by a mix of prosthetics, digital effects, and rapid weight loss. The visual effects team had to walk a fine line between realism and fantasy, especially with Renesmee's supernatural presence in utero. The filming of The Honeymoon in Brazil was so highly anticipated that paparazzi boats swarmed the set, causing significant disruptions. Yet despite the chaos, the film retained its intimacy, never losing sight of the emotional core beneath the spectacle. The score by Carter Burwell deserves special mention. It weaves the film's emotional threads together with haunting beauty, elegant piano melodies, tense strings, and swelling crescendos that elevate the drama without overpowering it. And with the return of musical motifs from the first film, it adds a full-circle resonance that underscores how far these characters have come. Culturally, Breaking Dawn Part 1 was a juggernaut. It dominated the box office, raked in over $700 million worldwide, and sparked endless online debate. Fans dissected every frame, every line, every glance. It was more than a movie, it was an event. Midnight premieres became communal celebrations. Wedding dresses were replicated across the world. And the conversation around the film, its themes, its risks, its controversies, cemented it as a turning point in young adult cinema. This isn't just another installment in a blockbuster franchise. It's the emotional boiling point of a saga that dared to take its time, that dared to be quiet when others shouted, that dared to show pain where others only chased action. Breaking Dawn Part 1 is a bold, haunting, unforgettable piece of fantasy cinema. And if you thought it was just about a vampire wedding and a strange pregnancy, you weren't watching closely enough. Because beneath the glittering surface lies a story about transformation, about what we're willing to lose for love, and what we become when we rise from that loss. That's what makes this film worth exploring. That's why it became a cultural phenomenon. And that's why, more than a decade later, people are still talking about it. The film begins not with action or confrontation, but with an invitation, an elegant, white envelope carrying the weight of everything that has led to this moment. Jacob Black, eyes burning with disbelief, clutches the wedding invitation to Bella and Edward's wedding. Without a word, he bolts into the forest, stripped bare by fury and heartbreak. The storm that has always simmered in his soul is finally uncontainable. And with that emotional burst, the tone is set. This isn't just the next chapter, it's the reckoning. Across town, Bella Swan is facing her own storm, but hers is quieter. Nervous glances, trembling hands, the soft rustle of satin as Alice fits her into custom-made wedding heels. In the Cullen household, wedding preparation is in full swing. Alice, always the epitome of supernatural chic, is in her element, orchestrating every detail with immortal precision. Rosalie, whose frosty relationship with Bella has slowly thawed, now tends lovingly to her future sister-in-law's hair. The dynamic among the Cullens is tender, strained, and steeped in significance. Each interaction carries the weight of finality. This is Bella's last day as a human. Edward Cullen, as stoic and eternally composed as ever, isn't immune to the pull of memory. In a rare moment of vulnerability, he confesses a piece of his past, his brief, bloody rebellion against his father's no-human-killing policy. Edward once hunted human monsters, murderers, rapists, justifying his bloodlust with a vigilante sense of justice. But that past haunts him, and as he speaks, there's a haunted remorse in his eyes. He fears Bella's choice, not just because she might suffer, but because she doesn't fully understand what she's giving up, or what she's marrying into. Then the day arrives. The wedding scene is nothing short of a fantasy tableau. Guests fill a forest transformed into a dreamscape, petals floating through the air like snow, light cascading through ancient trees. The orchestration is subtle and refined, not flashy. Charlie Swan, ever the gruff, loving father, walks Bella down the aisle, his quiet presence grounding an otherwise surreal moment. When Bella steps forward, her eyes locked on Edward's, time seems to stop. This isn't just a union of lovers. It's the fusion of worlds, vampire and human, life and death, past and future. Their vows are whispered, barely audible, as though sacred. When they kiss, applause breaks the hush, but for them, the world has vanished. The reception that follows is filled with familiar faces. Jessica, Mike, Angela, and Eric all provide brief moments of humor and nostalgia. But beneath the music and the toasts is a tension that never truly eases. Jacob arrives, drawn by a painful need to see her, to confirm it's real. Their dance in the woods is charged with suppressed emotion, edged with grief. When Jacob learns Bella plans to consummate her marriage while still human, his fury ignites. His concern is genuine. He believes it could kill her, but it's tangled in the roots of a love he can't let go. Soon Bella and Edward depart. Their destination? Alesme, Carlyle's gift to the couple, a private paradise off the coast of Brazil. Their honeymoon begins with laughter, tentative touches, and waves crashing beneath moonlight. Here, the cinematography changes. Gone are the muted blues and stormy grays of Forks. Instead, warm golds and tropical greens saturate every frame, offering a brief escape. Bella, nervous but determined, prepares herself for the unknown. What follows is both sensual and deeply human. Edward's hesitation, Bella's vulnerability, their exploration of intimacy. There's passion but also fear. The morning after, Bella wakes covered in bruises. Edward is horrified. Guilt consumes him. He vows never to touch her again, instead filling their days with swimming, chess, and stilted conversation. But Bella isn't afraid. She longs for closeness, for the physical expression of their love. Her desires clash with Edward's restraint, and the emotional tension grows thicker with every passing day. Then, a shift. A moment of nausea. A late period. Bella looks in the mirror and places a hand on her stomach. Something has changed. The realization hits like a silent scream. She's pregnant. Edward is stunned, disbelieving, panicked. This isn't supposed to be possible. Vampires aren't meant to create life. The housekeeper, Cor, catches a glimpse of Bella's belly and mutters in terror. She speaks of legends, of vampire men impregnating human women and leaving death in their wake. Edward, horrified, rushes to get Bella home. But Bella? She's already bonded with the life growing inside her. She refuses to terminate the pregnancy. Back in Forks, the Cullen home becomes a battlefield. Carlisle urges termination. The baby is growing too fast. It's feeding off Bella, threatening her life. Edward pleads with her. But Bella, thin and defiant, draws a line. This is her choice, her child. Rosalie sides with her, driven by a longing for the family she can never have. Her protectiveness becomes borderline obsessive. Emmett watches from the sidelines, quiet but ready. Alice, who sees the future, is clouded. She can't see the child. That alone signals danger. And Jacob, burning with rage and desperation, returns to find Bella a shadow of herself. Gone, bruised, dying. He begs her to let it go, but she won't, and his fury boils over. In a powerful sequence, he breaks from Sam's command and forms his own path. No longer a loyal soldier to the Alpha, he becomes his own leader, a lone wolf in every sense. Seth and Leah follow, creating a tiny pack of dissenters who align themselves with the Cullens, not because they love them, but because Jacob does. Meanwhile, the tension among the werewolves reaches a boiling point. Sam, believing the unborn child is a threat, calls for an attack. He plans to kill Bella to protect the tribe. Jacob's betrayal wounds him deeply, and for the first time, the wolves are at war with each other. Back at the Cullen house, time runs out. Bella's body is breaking faster than expected. The baby is sapping her life away. Edward is unraveling. He's desperate. He tries everything to feed Bella. Blood smoothies, medical interventions. Nothing works until, shockingly, drinking human blood starts to help. Bella drinks from a cup, her face cringing, but life returns to her cheeks. Her strength stabilizes. There's a disturbing irony to it. Her body, now part vampire in function, responding to the very thing she once feared. And in this moment, Edward connects to the child. He hears thoughts, emotions, a voice. It's not a monster. It's a child. Their child. And for the first time, Edward softens. He touches Bella's stomach with wonder. They name her Renesmee, a combination of their mothers' names, Renee and Esme. The tenderness in that moment is short-lived, but unforgettable. Outside, the wolves wait. Inside, life and death dance on the edge of a scalpel. The baby shifts, fractures Bella's spine. She collapses. Screams echo through the house. It's time. The moment that's been building since the first frame has finally arrived. And from here, the film plunges into its most harrowing stretch yet. An event so visceral, it transforms the nature of the entire saga. The house is silent, yet charged. Every breath, every heartbeat amplified as Bella lies broken on the surgical table. Her body is giving out. Her spine has snapped, her ribs fractured, and her heart falters under the weight of the impossible birth. It's chaos, but calculated chaos. Carlisle isn't home. Edward takes over. Rosalie begins the operation but is overwhelmed by the blood and is forced to step aside. Edward, with trembling hands and desperation carved into every line of his face, does what he must. He performs the C-section with his teeth. The screams, the blood, the sheer brutality of the moment. It's unflinching, visceral. Bella is fading fast. And then, Amidst the horror, a miracle. A cry. A baby's cry. The child is born, small, impossibly beautiful, and already alert with deep brown eyes. Renesmee. Edward holds her for the briefest of moments, eyes wide with awe, before handing her to Rosalie. Bella, weak and drenched in sweat, manages a small, blissful smile. She's done it. She's seen her daughter. But the cost is everything. Her heart stops. Edward works frantically, injecting her with his venom, biting her across her body in hopes of jump-starting the transformation. Jacob watches, paralyzed by sorrow. He sees the life leaving Bella's eyes, her skin paling, her warmth vanishing. His rage takes over. He storms from the room and stumbles into the nursery where Rosalie cradles Renesmee. His breath catches. Something shifts. As he looks into the newborn's eyes, something ancient and primal occurs. He imprints. In werewolf lore, imprinting is the unbreakable bond, a gravitational pull more powerful than love or choice. It's not romantic. It's destiny. And in that moment, Jacob's future is rewritten. But inside, Edward is still fighting. He massages Bella's heart, whispering to her, begging her to come back. The camera focuses on her face, still cold. Inside her, a battle is raging. We enter Bella's mind. A montage of her life plays in reverse. Charlie holding her as a baby. Her first dance with Edward. Every laugh, every touch. Then darkness. But the venom surges through her veins like wildfire. Her fingers twitch. Her spine heals. Her heart begins to beat again. Slowly, powerfully. And her eyes open, no longer brown but crimson red. Bella is no longer human. What follows is a haunting stillness. Bella wakes in a world transformed. Her senses are heightened. Dust motes hover in the air like suspended time. She hears the flit of insect wings, the heartbeat of a deer in the woods, every movement around her amplified. She sees Edward radiant and clear, as if for the first time. Their eyes lock. There's a different kind of hunger in her now. A need for blood, but also for touch, for connection. Their kiss is electric, no longer cautious. It's a collision of equals. But first, Bella must hunt. The Cullens take her into the woods, and the camera follows her predator's gaze. Every leaf rustle, every scent, every shift in light becomes a cue. She sees a deer, but is suddenly distracted by a rock climber above. Blood, human blood. She sprints, supernaturally fast, but stops herself just in time. Her control astonishes the family. Bella is not like other newborns. She's focused, composed, a testament to her iron will. Back at the Cullen home, she finally meets her daughter. Renesmee, held in Rosalie's arms, glows with warmth and intelligence. The child is unique. She grows rapidly, days equaling months in development. And she has a gift. She can show her thoughts through touch. When she places her hand on Bella's cheek, she shares a memory. Her birth, her family, her bond with Jacob. Bella watches, stunned. Her daughter is a miracle, a new kind of being, part human, part vampire, born not bitten. A living impossibility. But this miracle soon becomes a threat. Irina, a member of the Denali coven and former friend of the Cullens, sees Renesmee from a distance and misinterprets what she sees. To her, the child isn't a hybrid. It's an immortal child, a forbidden creation in the vampire world. Centuries ago, such children wrought chaos with uncontrollable power and no sense of secrecy. The Volturi, the ancient ruling body, wiped them out and declared any attempt at creating one punishable by death. Irina, driven by grief and bitterness over her mate's death, reports Renesmee to the Volturi. Ero, the Volturi's enigmatic leader, is intrigued. The Cullens' alliance, their gifts, their strength. It has always fascinated him. But now he has a reason to move against them. He gathers his guard, including Jane and Alec, and prepares for confrontation. But this isn't just a mission of justice. It's an opportunity to absorb powerful vampires into the Volturi's fold. Alice, sensing the future, sees the approaching storm. She and Jasper vanish, leaving behind only a cryptic note. The Cullens, understanding the gravity of the situation, begin rallying allies from across the world. Vampires of every creed and continent arrive. Egyptians, Irish, Amazons, nomads. Each brings a unique gift and a powerful loyalty. Some, like Zephrina, possess illusions. Others, like Benjamin, can manipulate the elements. The Cullen home becomes a fortress of quiet strength, a gathering place of legends. Bella, newly transformed, also discovers her power, mental shielding. She can block psychic attacks, protecting herself and others from abilities like Jane's pain illusions and Alec's sensory deprivation. She trains rigorously, building her strength. The once clumsy girl from Forks is now a warrior, a mother, a wife, a vampire with unbreakable resolve. As the Volturi draw nearer, tensions rise. Snow blankets the earth, covering the battlefield in stillness. Then the day arrives. The two armies meet in a frozen clearing. The Cullens stand shoulder to shoulder with their allies, eyes locked on the black-robed figures gliding silently across the snow. The confrontation is Shakespearean, charged with subtext and menace. Arrow steps forward, smiling like death incarnate. He asks to see Renesmee, and Bella presents her daughter. When the child touches Arrow, showing her origins, he is briefly disarmed. But it's not enough. Arrow doubts. He questions. He fears what Renesmee might become. His guards prepare for battle. Then, Alice returns. She strides across the field, demanding to speak. She shows Arrow a vision of the future. A brutal, fiery clash where many fall. Carlisle, Jasper, Jane, Alec, even Arrow himself. The battle is horrifying. An epic bloodbath of snapping necks, screaming powers, and fading flames. It's relentless. And then the vision ends. It never happened. Alice was showing Arrow what would come if he chooses violence. The message is clear. Proceed, and it ends in mutual annihilation. Arrow, always calculating, steps back. He smiles, but the defeat is written in the lines of his face. He calls off the attack. The Volturi retreat. Relief floods the snowy field. Cheers break out. Families embrace. The battle never came, but the courage it demanded was very real. In the aftermath, life returns to its surreal version of normal. Renesmee continues to grow, her future bright with possibilities. Bella and Edward, finally free of shadows and threats, walk together into the woods. Edward touches her face, and suddenly, for the first time, he hears her thoughts. Bella lowers her shield and shares her love with him. Not through words, but through pure, unfettered emotion. Their memories, their kisses, their laughter. Every moment flows into him like sunlight through stained glass. His breath catches. "No one has ever loved anyone as much as I love you," Bella says. And Edward, speechless, can only gaze at her with awe. Their journey, from biology class to battle lines, has been a story of evolution, of sacrifice, and of a love that defied nature, time, and even death. And as they stand together, immortal and unbreakable, the final image fades. Page turns. A book closes. But the legend of Bella and Edward, of Jacob and Renesmee, of wolves and vampires and impossible love, it lives on, in the hearts of fans, in the pages of the saga, and in the snow-covered fields of imagination. In the sprawling, shadow-draped world of Breaking Dawn Part 1, character is everything. Strip away the supernatural spectacle. The vampires, the wolves, the ancient laws, and what remains is a deeply intimate story about choice, sacrifice, and transformation. And at the center of it all is Bella Swan. Kristen Stewart's performance is quiet, measured, but profoundly intense, like the surface of a lake concealing a churning current beneath. In this chapter of her journey, Bella is no longer the indecisive girl of Forks High. She's on the cusp of womanhood, and every decision she makes now carries weight, consequence, and irreversible change. From the very first frame, we see a Bella who is painfully aware of the path she's chosen. The wedding to Edward is more than a romantic finale. It's a symbolic death of her old self. She walks down that aisle not just to marry a man she loves, but to step fully into the world he inhabits, where mortality is traded for eternity, and love must be fierce enough to endure centuries. Stewart lets every flicker of Bella's anxiety play on her face in the moments leading up to the ceremony. Her fingers tremble. Her breathing shortens. But when she locks eyes with Edward at the altar, everything settles. Her love gives her clarity, purpose. Edward Cullen, as portrayed by Robert Pattinson, is more conflicted than ever. He's been a vampire for over a century, but his soul remains tethered to guilt, to the human lives he once took, to the idea that he is forever damned. And yet, here is Bella, full of life, ready to give up her humanity for him. Pattinson's performance oscillates between reverence and resistance. He wants her love, desperately, but fears what taking it might cost her. The honeymoon sequence on Isle Esme is where this conflict erupts. Edward is tender, passionate, but consumed by remorse after their first night together leaves Bella bruised. His fear of his own strength, of hurting her, is overwhelming. And this is where the emotional realism of the film shines. Instead of glossing over these moments with fantasy, director Bill Condon lets us linger in the discomfort. Edward becomes distant. Bella, yearning and confused, pushes for intimacy. The dynamic flips the traditional vampire mythos on its head. Here, it is the human who is unafraid, and the monster who recoils from his desires. Pattinson and Stewart play this dance with aching sincerity, letting silence and body language speak more than dialogue ever could. But Bella's transformation is far from metaphorical. When she becomes pregnant with a half-human, half-vampire child, everything shifts. Suddenly, it's not about weddings or honeymoons. It's about survival. And this is where Stewart truly commands the screen. Her physical decline is harrowing. Gaunt cheeks, hollow eyes, trembling limbs. She disappears before our eyes. But emotionally, she has never been more present. Bella refuses to terminate the pregnancy despite the risks, clinging to the child growing inside her as if it's the last piece of herself she has to hold on to. Her maternal instinct is not born from experience. It's primal. Stewart gives us a woman who is dying, but absolutely certain of why she's willing to do so. Edward, meanwhile, unravels. His anguish becomes unbearable. He lashes out at Jacob, pleads with Bella, breaks furniture in frustration. Pattinson reveals the fragile man behind the immortal face, a lover who can't protect the one person who matters most. It's only in the final minutes of Bella's life that Edward finds clarity, when he fights to bring her back from the brink, injecting her with his venom and biting her to force the transformation. The desperation in his eyes, the trembling in his voice. It's not horror anymore. It's hope, the salvation, cloaked in pain. But in the shadows of Bella and Edward's drama, another heart beats with equal power. Jacob Black, played by Taylor Lautner, undergoes perhaps the most emotionally brutal transformation of all. He begins the film still clinging to the idea that Bella might choose him. When she marries Edward, his heartbreak is palpable, but his devotion doesn't falter. Lautner captures Jacob's burning intensity, but tempers it with a maturing restraint. He stops being the impulsive boy who brawls with Edward at every turn. Instead, he becomes a protector, standing beside Bella even when it tears him apart. Jacob's relationship with the unborn child is where his arc takes a surreal turn. At first, he views the pregnancy as a death sentence for Bella. He fights the Cullens. He nearly attacks Edward. But the moment Renesmee is born, something ancient and inexplicable takes hold of him. Imprinting. Lautner plays this moment with a subtlety that borders on spiritual. There's no romantic overtone, just a sense of being anchored to something beyond himself. In that instant, his purpose becomes clear. He was never meant to be with Bella. He was meant to protect her daughter. And this twist, strange as it is, gives Jacob peace. His arc bends not toward possession, but toward guardianship. He becomes more than just the third corner of a love triangle. He becomes a bridge between two worlds, human and supernatural, and someone whose loyalty will define the future of the saga. Surrounding this emotional core is an ensemble cast that lends richness and complexity to the narrative. Rosalie Hale, played with ice-cold poise by Nikki Reed, is perhaps the most surprising ally. Historically cold and aloof, Rosalie's sudden warmth toward Bella is rooted in something deeply personal, her own stolen chance at motherhood. She sees in Renesmee a second chance, a miracle worth protecting at all costs. Reed softens the edges of Rosalie's character, showing us vulnerability under the veneer of vanity. Her defense of Bella's choice isn't just loyalty. It's projection, love, and longing wrapped in platinum blonde armor. Then there's Alice Cullen, ethereal, whimsical, and fiercely loyal. Ashley Greene infuses Alice with a lightness that balances the heavy tones of the film. But even her optimism is shadowed by dread as her visions begin to fail with the hybrid child in Bella's womb. Her absence in the second half of the film, when she and Jasper leave, is felt like a missing heartbeat, one that will only return when it matters most in Part 2. Carlisle and Esme, the Cullen patriarch and matriarch, provide the steady moral compass. Peter Facinelli and Elizabeth Reeser offer performances grounded in compassion and wisdom. Carlisle's medical background makes him the logical one, seeking solutions. Esme, the heart of the family, supports Bella unconditionally. They don't always agree, but their unity in crisis reinforces the Cullen family's core strength: love without condition. Even the Volturi cast their looming shadow over the events of the film. Though they do not directly intervene in Part 1, their presence is felt in every rule, every fear whispered about what Renesmee's existence might mean. Arrow's brief mid-credits moment, played with eerie delight by Michael Sheen, reminds us that power, once challenged, never sleeps for long. His eyes gleam not with justice, but with anticipation. The chessboard is being set, and he is always watching. Among the werewolves, the internal strife adds another layer of tension. Sam Yulee, the alpha, represents tradition and obedience. When Jacob breaks from the pack to protect Bella, it's more than rebellion. It's a spiritual shift. We hear their thoughts in a telepathic chorus. Animalistic, conflicted, united by blood but divided by love. This is a world where loyalty is tested not just by species, but by ideology. The supporting characters aren't just background. They're catalysts, reflections, and foils. Leah Clearwater, the lone female werewolf, snarls at the pack's decisions but follows Jacob out of her own complex pain. Seth, her younger brother, provides innocent optimism. Their small moments, often wordless, add texture to the emotional tapestry. At the heart of it all is transformation. Every character, from Bella to Rosalie to Jacob, is evolving, shedding skins, confronting their fears. The performances are not showy, but lived in. Kristen Stewart transforms her physicality entirely, from the awkward teenager of earlier films to the iron-willed mother-to-be, whose spine literally breaks but whose spirit never does. Robert Pattinson captures Edward's centuries of pain and his desperate hope. Taylor Lautner moves Jacob from fire to ash, from boy to man. It's a rare feat in genre filmmaking to create a supernatural story where the most powerful moments are rooted in very human emotion. Love, loss, longing, fear, acceptance. And it's through the eyes of these characters, and the performances that embody them, that Breaking Dawn Part 1 transcends its genre trappings. These characters linger not because of the world they inhabit, but because of the truths they represent. The courage to choose your path, the agony of watching someone you love change before your eyes, and the quiet, resounding strength it takes to stand your ground when everything else is shifting beneath you. In a film steeped in love, sacrifice, and supernatural allure, Breaking Dawn Part 1 cloaks many of its most fascinating details beneath the surface. Woven delicately into background gestures, musical echoes, visual cues, and symbolic framing. These aren't just trivial Easter eggs. They're subtle brushstrokes that enrich the narrative tapestry and reward those who watch with care. It begins quietly, in the very first moments, as Bella holds the invitation to her wedding. If you look closely, the envelope's return address reveals the name, Dr. Carlisle Cullen. It's a small, easily missed detail, but one that gently reinforces the Cullen family's foundation in normalcy, despite their otherworldly nature. Carlisle isn't just the moral leader of the coven. He's a physician, a father figure, and the face of legitimacy in the human world. Even their wedding invitation blends old-world formality with the illusion of a traditional family. The wedding sequence itself is a playground for references and callbacks. The music that plays as Bella walks down the aisle, turning page by sleeping at last, isn't just a romantic choice. Its lyrics foreshadow the emotional journey to come. I've waited 100 years, but I'd wait 1,000,000 more for you. The words are Edward's truth, literal and figurative, echoing his century-long wait for someone who could give his eternal life meaning. What many viewers might not immediately recognize is that the piano piece Edward played for Bella in the first film, Bella's Lullaby, is briefly reprised by Carter Burwell in the wedding score. It's a subtle musical callback, underscoring the culmination of a love story that began years and lifetimes ago. Look even closer at Bella's wedding dress, and you'll see deeper meaning woven into its design. Catherine Hardwicke, the original Twilight director, once envisioned Bella as someone uncomfortable with extravagance. This is reflected in the gown's sleek, timeless silhouette, designed by Carolina Herrera. But it's the back of the dress that holds symbolic resonance. A row of delicate buttons trails down her spine like vertebrae, foreshadowing the breaking of her back during labor later in the film. A haunting symmetry, elegant yet ominous. During the reception, the toasts delivered by Emmett, Jessica, and Charlie provide more than comic relief. Jessica's speech, dripping with jealousy, harkens back to the first film school scenes where she subtly competed with Bella for attention. Anna Kendrick plays this with tongue-in-cheek sarcasm, grounding the otherwise fantastical tone in very real social awkwardness. Meanwhile, Emmett's joke about Edward's super strength draws laughs from the crowd, but foreshadows the danger of their honeymoon intimacy, which ends with Bella covered in bruises and shattered headboards. Speaking of that honeymoon, the secluded Isle Esme, named after Edward's adoptive mother, is more than just a romantic setting. Its pristine, untouched beauty mirrors Bella's state of innocence as she steps into married life. But there's a symbolic erosion that begins here. Each moment of pleasure is shadowed by consequence. The broken bed is not just a nod to vampire strength. It's a visual metaphor for the fragility of Bella's human form amid this supernatural world. Even the feathers drifting in the air after their first night are a callback to the purity of swans, Bella's namesake, and how that purity is slowly being torn apart. When Bella stands in front of the mirror the morning after, examining the bruises on her body, the imagery is layered. Mirrors in this saga often serve as windows into transformation. In New Moon, Bella's reflection showed emptiness. In Eclipse, it hinted at duality. Here, the mirror reveals conflict, desire versus consequence, love versus pain. Stewart's expression is not one of fear, but awe. It subtly reminds us that Bella is not the damsel of earlier chapters. She chooses this life, fully aware of what it entails. And then, there's the pregnancy, a sudden, terrifying turn that upends everything. Look at Edward's reaction when he hears the words "days late." His face drops not out of surprise, but recognition. There's something ancient and dark that he recalls. This moment, played almost silently, reveals Edward's awareness of vampire legends and the impossibility, or danger, of such a hybrid birth. Connects to lore that predates even the Volturi. And in a clever touch, the film doesn't need exposition. The dread on Edward's face says it all. As Bella's pregnancy progresses, her physical deterioration is matched by subtle changes in the film's color palette. The warm, golden hues of the honeymoon scenes fade into the cold, desaturated tones of the Cullen home. Cinematographer Guillermo Navarro gradually bleeds color from the frame, matching Bella's life force as it drains. Her cheeks hollow, her eyes sink. The walls of the house even appear more sterile, hospital-like, foreshadowing the inevitable trauma of the birth. Yet inside that coldness, there are symbols of defiance. Rosalie's sudden protectiveness over Bella is rooted not only in her backstory but subtly reflected in the environment. Look at how she never lets go of the silver bowl as she feeds Bella blood. Rosalie is hands-on, literally sustaining the baby because she sees it as a miracle she never got to have. And her braided hairstyle, regal and severe, reflects the armor she puts on to shield herself emotionally while being Bella's fiercest advocate. One of the most clever hidden details lies in the werewolf telepathy scene. When Jacob breaks from the pack, viewers hear a chorus of growling thoughts. Animalistic, overlapping, primal. But listen closely, and you'll catch remnants of dialogue that reflect their personal conflicts. Sam's voice is full of fear and responsibility. Leah's thoughts are tinged with bitterness. These aren't just voices, they're character profiles rendered in sound. The sequence is stylized, yes, but it serves as an audio map of the werewolf psyche, revealing tension and hierarchy without a single line of traditional dialogue. Jacob's solo moments carry their own visual cues. After imprinting on Renesmee, his posture changes. Lautner plays this with nuance. You'll notice that he stops slouching, his expression hardens with quiet purpose, and his body language becomes protective. It's subtle, almost imperceptible, but speaks volumes. And the name Renesmee itself, a fusion of Renee and Esme, is not just a quirky invention. It symbolizes the unification of Bella's human past and her vampire future. It's awkward, yes, but deeply meaningful within the family's emotional logic. The birth scene is packed with layered imagery. The scalpel Edward uses to perform the C-section isn't visible in detail, but it's made from his teeth. A brutal, primal reminder that even the most refined vampire is still a predator at his core. And when Bella slips into death, the montage that plays, flashes of her life, her childhood, her parents, her moments with Edward, is structured like a soul's final review. But eagle-eyed fans will notice that these flashbacks include shots from earlier films, placed in reverse chronological order, almost like her life is rewinding before our eyes. It's a beautiful, tragic spiral into nothingness, until the venom takes hold. And here's where the film gets even more artful. The sequence of Bella's transformation isn't just physical. It's symbolic. Her heart, shown in a tight close-up, begins to beat slowly again, as the venom courses through her. But listen closely, the sound design uses an actual human fetal heartbeat layered with a ticking clock. Birth and death merge. Time halts and begins again, and as her skin crystallizes, the cracks resemble ice fractals. A nod to her impending immortality and the Cold One's legend. The final shot before her red eyes open, Bella lying perfectly still, her body fully healed, is staged like a vampire version of Sleeping Beauty. The lighting softens, the music swells, and she awakens transformed. But here's the twist. The transformation was already happening long before the venom. Bella has been shedding her human skin metaphorically for the entire film. The red eyes are just the final confirmation. The end credits offer their own hidden delights. If you stay through them, a mid-credit scene shows the Volturi receiving news of Bella and Edward's child. Arrow, played by the always mesmerizing Michael Sheen, barely contains his excitement. But this isn't just a teaser. It subtly mirrors scenes from New Moon and Eclipse where the Volturi manipulate events from the shadows. The chess pieces are moving again, and Arrow's gaze to the camera is as much a warning to the audience as it is a signal to his coven. War is coming. There's even a literary Easter egg in the title itself. Breaking Dawn implies the end of darkness, the beginning of a new day. But in the film, it's not light that arrives. It's transformation, danger, rebirth. The dawn breaks not as a sunrise, but as Bella breaks physically and spiritually to be reborn into something entirely new. Even the house decor in the Cullen residence reflects this idea. A particular painting, hanging near the staircase, depicts a forest clearing with rays of sunlight barely piercing the trees. It's a mirror of Forks itself, a place always on the edge of darkness. But it also symbolizes hope, light struggling to break through the gloom. In many ways, that's what Bella represents to the Cullens. A bridge to the sun they cannot touch. Every frame of Breaking Dawn Part 1 is carefully constructed, often doubling as metaphor and foreshadowing. The feathers, the bruises, the mirrors, the color grading, the music, they all whisper secrets to attentive viewers. It's not just about vampires and werewolves. It's about identity, love's transformative power, and the pain required to become who we're meant to be. Because behind the fantasy lies something achingly real. A young woman claiming her life, no matter the cost. And in every subtle cue, the film honors that journey. not with spectacle alone, but with layered, deliberate storytelling that dares you to look closer. Behind every sweeping shot of moonlit vows, blood-stained sheets, and supernatural stairs lies a chaotic, fascinating world of filmmaking. And Breaking Dawn Part 1, despite its glossy surface, was born from some of the most unexpected and unusual behind-the-scenes moments the saga had ever faced. What may have looked like a perfectly coordinated wedding on screen was, in reality, pulled off amid intense secrecy, grueling conditions, and a constant dance with die-hard fans who would stop at nothing to uncover every scene before it hit theaters. It all began with a challenge. How do you film a movie that everyone already knows the ending to, and still keep it captivating? The answer, according to director Bill Condon, was not just to stay faithful to the book, but to go deeper, more intimate, more emotionally grounded. And that shift in tone didn't come without resistance. Unlike the earlier films, which were more action-driven and teenage angst-laced, Breaking Dawn Part 1 had to grapple with marriage, sex, death, childbirth, and rebirth, all while making sure the fantasy still held its shimmer. But as filming began, it became clear this wasn't just going to be a movie. It would be a controlled storm. Let's talk about the wedding, one of the most anticipated scenes in YA cinema history. Summit Entertainment knew fans would do anything to get a glimpse of Bella's dress or the setup, and with paparazzi buzzing over Vancouver like drones, they had to take serious measures. The set was a total lockdown. Even cast and crew were given code names to avoid leaks. Kristen Stewart was wrapped in black cloaks anytime she left her trailer to keep her dress hidden. The trees around the ceremony site were shrouded with massive tarps to obscure the view from helicopters. It felt more like a top-secret government operation than a movie shoot. But despite all that secrecy, it wasn't protection from fans that posed the biggest threat. It was the weather. The scene was supposed to be bathed in soft, floral-drenched sunlight, but nature had other plans. Rain poured down for hours. The forest floor turned to mud. Delicate flowers sagged under the weight of water. The crew had to scramble, pumping water off the paths and drying petals between takes. The actors shivered under the sheer dresses and tuxedos, and everyone's patience was tested. Yet somehow, the final scene emerged looking like a dream. And that's part of the Twilight magic. It looks effortless, even when it's anything but. Kristen Stewart later said she felt overwhelmed filming the wedding, not because of the cameras, but because of the emotional weight. For years, Bella had been walking toward this moment. And in many ways, so had Stewart. She admitted that seeing the Cullens lined up, Edward at the altar, and the set fully dressed actually made her cry. This wasn't just a scene. It was the climax of a cinematic romance the world had obsessed over. For a moment, she wasn't playing Bella. She was Bella. But the emotion didn't end there. The honeymoon scenes shot in Brazil presented their own unique set of hurdles. Most notably, the presence of hundreds of locals who had no intention of respecting the film's privacy. Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson were hounded constantly. Boats lined the perimeter of the set, filled with people trying to catch glimpses or snap photos. Security guards had to sweep the beach every morning. Even the cruise hotel became a target. Brazilian fans lined the streets with posters, shouting through megaphones, camping out for days. Despite the chaos, Pattinson and Stewart managed to film some of the most intimate moments of the saga with surprising grace. But those scenes weren't just emotionally raw, they were logistically nightmarish. The now infamous feather scene, where Bella wakes up bruised and covered in down, had to be meticulously choreographed. Those floating feathers weren't real. They were placed one by set dressers, who agonized over the symbolism. Everything had to be gentle yet violent, elegant but destructive. They even used a custom-built bed design to break in the right way on cue. And while it looked seamless on screen, the bed didn't always cooperate. One take left the headboard completely shattered before the cameras even rolled. Even more intense was the pregnancy arc, especially Bella's physical deterioration. Kristen Stewart had to undergo hours of prosthetics, digital facial mapping, and precise lighting to achieve that haunting, skeletal look. Special effects were used to shrink her eyes, hollow her cheeks, and thin her frame. She wore a body-hugging silicone suit that made her look like she was wasting away. But it wasn't just tech. It was Stewart's performance that sold it. She would isolate herself between takes, stay seated for long periods to keep her energy low, and avoid eye contact to enhance the sense of frailty. But that authenticity sometimes came at a cost. Stewart later admitted that playing the sickly Bella took a toll on her. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, and often left set with bruises from the prosthetics. She even lost weight during the shoot, intentionally and otherwise, to match the physical transformation. And then came the birth scene, easily one of the most controversial and surreal sequences in the film. In the book, it's narrated from Jacob's point of view to avoid the gory details. But on screen, it had to be visualized. Director Bill Condon made the bold choice to lean into the horror. Bella's spine cracks, her body writhes. There's blood, screaming, snapping bones. It was closer to The Exorcist than a YA fantasy. And the MPAA didn't like it. Early test screenings earned the film an R rating, forcing editors to scale back the gore. But even with those changes, many critics were shocked by how intense it remained. Condon later joked that Breaking Dawn Part 1 might be the first vampire film where childbirth is scarier than any monster. There were even stranger incidents. One of the wolves, yes, the giant CGI wolves, almost didn't make it into the scene where Jacob breaks away from Sam's pack. The original plan involved elaborate motion capture with actors in suits, but budget constraints forced them to improvise. Instead, they used cardboard cutouts of wolves for eye lines, which Lautner had to growl and snarl at while pretending to phase. It was reportedly one of the silliest and most awkward things to film. Taylor Lautner couldn't stop laughing during takes, even though the scene was meant to be deadly serious. And speaking of Lautner, one of the most bizarre press incidents happened during the promotion of the film. At a major fan event, a girl rushed the stage and tried to hand Lautner a vial of her own blood, saying it was her way of pledging loyalty to the werewolf pack. Security intervened, but Lautner remained professional, even giving the fan a hug. Moments like that highlighted just how intense the Twilight fandom had become. The line between reality and fiction was blurring, and the cast often found themselves at the epicenter of a cultural storm. Robert Pattinson, meanwhile, had his own strange on-set experience during the scene where Edward performs the C-section. He confessed that he found the sequence deeply disturbing to shoot, not just because of the prosthetics, but because he genuinely felt squeamish. The fake blood, rubber baby, and sounds of cracking bones created a surreal atmosphere. At one point, the doll used for Renesmee malfunctioned, making jerky, robotic movements. The crew nicknamed it Chucksmee, a Frankenstein-like animatronic that creeped everyone out. It was so unsettling that they scrapped it halfway through and switched to CGI-enhanced close-ups. To this day, footage of the original doll has become a viral oddity among Twilight fans. But among all the chaos, there were moments of real beauty behind the scenes. Bill Condon kept a family atmosphere on set, often pausing production to check in with actors emotionally. He encouraged improvisation, especially during the wedding toasts. Most of those lines weren't scripted. Billy Burke, who plays Charlie, delivered his awkward father of the bride's speech off the cuff, drawing real laughs from the extras. Anna Kendrick's snarky toast? Mostly her own creation. It brought authenticity to a scene that might have otherwise felt too polished. One of the quietest but most touching tributes came at the very end. The final credits of Breaking Dawn Part 1 don't just list cast and crew. They feature a flipbook of every major character who had appeared across the franchise, leading up to Bella's transformation. It was designed as a love letter to fans, a subtle way of saying, "You've come this far with us, thank you." And for longtime viewers, it felt like closure and a promise all in one. Despite the film's enormous budget and polished look, it was riddled with small, barely held-together miracles. The night scenes were often filmed during bitterly cold mornings, with fake breath effects added later. The Cullen house interior wasn't one location, but several cobbled together across different states and sound stages. Even Bella's iconic hair was a wig for several scenes, due to reshoots happening after Stewart had cut her hair for Snow White and the Huntsman. You'd never know, thanks to a team of hairstylists who labored endlessly to blend the illusion. Ultimately, Breaking Dawn Part 1 wasn't just about making a supernatural love story. It was about balancing spectacle with sincerity, all while navigating an obsessed fanbase, intense scrutiny, and an industry unsure whether the phenomenon could be sustained. The film succeeded because it embraced the absurdity and beauty in equal measure. It gave us broken beds and animatronic babies, yes, but also raw performances, haunting transformations, and one of the most unforgettable love stories of the era. It stands today not just as a chapter in a saga, but as a testament to the strange alchemy of filmmaking, where chaos births magic, and where behind every polished frame, there's a tale wilder than fiction. When the Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn Part 1 first graced theaters on November 18, 2011, audiences walked in expecting fantasy. What they received, however, was something far more unexpected. An emotionally fraught, thematically ambitious film that balanced intimate moments with deeply visceral storytelling. Beneath the surface of sparkles, vows, and blood was a bold cinematic pivot, and nestled within it were key moments that defined not only the film but the entire franchise. These scenes didn't just move the plot. They left an imprint, both on screen and in the hearts of those watching. It begins, as most stories of transformation do, with a dress. Bella's walk down the aisle isn't just a romantic moment. It's a culmination of emotional stakes stretching across 3 films. The music swells, the forest glows, but the silence between her footsteps is louder than any orchestral cue. Her nerves are palpable, and Edward's expression, somewhere between awe, anxiety, and pure devotion, grounds it all. What makes this moment so impactful isn't just the spectacle of the ceremony or the revelation of Bella's dress, a Carolina Herrera design that became iconic overnight. It's the quiet vulnerability shared between them. The wedding scene is a celebration of love that has fought through every kind of resistance, from Jacob's warnings to Edward's guilt, to Bella's own recklessness. It's a moment that says, "We've chosen each other. No turning back." But perhaps what gives the wedding even more emotional resonance is how it subtly echoes the film's central theme, irreversible change. The white of Bella's dress, the soft glow of the forest, and the loving faces of the Cullen family all feel like a dream. But under it, there's a dread, a premonition of what's to come. For Bella, this isn't just about joining lives. It's about crossing a threshold into something inhuman. That tone shift becomes undeniable when the story transitions to the honeymoon in Brazil. What should be a joyous escape begins to spiral into one of the most talked about scenes in the saga. The first night on Isle Esme. Edward and Bella's long-anticipated consummation was hyped, feared, and debated before the cameras even rolled. How would the filmmakers handle such a sensitive and polarizing scene, especially one that involves a human vampire pairing so intense it leaves Bella bruised and the bed destroyed? The answer? With elegance, restraint, and an undertow of emotional complexity. The scene doesn't dwell in eroticism. It lingers in aftermath. Edward's horror at seeing the bruises on Bella's skin speaks volumes. His shame, her defensiveness, their confusion. It's all woven into a moment that forces both characters to confront the cost of what they've long desired. Audiences found themselves surprisingly moved, not by passion, but by vulnerability. It was no longer just about fantasy. It was about the emotional realities of physical intimacy, especially in a relationship built on longing and restraint. Then comes the chilling twist, Bella's unexpected pregnancy. The moment she realizes she's late, that her body has already begun to change, is laced with dread. Plays like a horror beat. The mirror shows not just a growing belly, but a haunting awareness. Something inside her is alive, and it's not entirely human. The series shifts tone here more than ever before. Gone are the sweeping romantic visuals. In their place, silence, confusion, and the hum of something unnatural brewing within. This moment is perhaps the film's most effective use of shock. For readers, the pregnancy was a known element, but seeing it unfold on screen so quickly, so jarringly, felt different. Bella's eyes wide in the mirror, Edward frozen, the camera catching the slow panic seeping into their tropical paradise. It redefines the stakes, transforming the story from a love drama into something akin to body horror, and audiences felt that unease deeply. From there, Breaking Dawn Part 1 dives headfirst into its darkest, most emotionally charged sequence, Bella's physical deterioration. Kristen Stewart's performance here, understated yet utterly haunting, anchors the film in a realism few expected. Her cheeks hollow, her skin turns translucent, and her movements grow painfully slow. But it's not just the visuals. It's her internal resolve that draws viewers in. Bella, dying in front of everyone she loves, never once questions her choice. This is what she wanted. Her love for the unborn child, whom she names Renasme, is absolute, even as it eats her alive from the inside. This unflinching portrayal of maternal sacrifice stunned many. Critics and fans alike were torn. Was it empowering, disturbing, romanticized? The truth lies in the gray space the film refuses to simplify. Bella is not a victim, but she is dying, and everyone around her, especially Edward, spirals in their own emotional chaos trying to save her. His scientific desperation, juxtaposed with Jacob's emotional torment, creates a web of grief, love, and conflict that carries far more weight than many expected from the franchise. One of the most powerful sequences in the film comes when Edward, in a rare moment of complete collapse, listens to their unborn child's thoughts. For the first time, he hears something pure, innocent, and loving coming from the creature inside Bella. His expression, relief, awe, disbelief, marks a dramatic emotional pivot. In a single moment, Edward goes from seeing the pregnancy as a threat to embracing it as a miracle. It's a stunning beat in Robert Pattinson's performance, so subtle, yet so emotionally grounded, and it reshapes the final act. Yet, it's not Edward who ultimately rises as the emotional anchor. It's Jacob. Taylor Lautner delivers one of his most nuanced performances during Jacob's arc of separation. When he breaks from Sam's pack to protect Bella and the baby, it's not just a rebellion. It's a declaration of purpose. He finds a new identity beyond the triangle of unrequited love. The scene in which he forms his own pack is often overlooked, but it's crucial. It marks Jacob's maturation, his independence. The wolf pack dynamic, including the telepathic argument, was criticized for its odd tonal shift, but thematically it offers something valuable. The notion that loyalty and love aren't always the same. Jacob loves Bella, but he doesn't choose bitterness. He chooses her safety, even if it breaks him. And then, the film reaches its most harrowing moment, Bella's childbirth. Rarely has a YA film dared to depict something so visceral. Her body writhing in agony, the sound of her spine cracking, blood gushing from her mouth, and Edward, hands trembling, trying to cut through with his teeth. It's pure chaos. It's also masterfully done. The scene balances horror with heartbreak. Kristen Stewart's lifeless eyes, Robert Pattinson's frantic attempts to revive her, the silence of the baby's first cries. It all unfolds with an emotional intensity that transcends genre. The childbirth scene is a crescendo not just of the film, but of the entire series' emotional journey. Bella dies, and in that death, we see every choice, every risk, every moment of love come to its tragic fruition. The pain on Edward's face, Jacob's silent weeping, the Cullen's desperation. It's devastating. The film pauses here. It lets the grief settle. And then, in a heartbeat, it pivots again. Bella opens her eyes. Golden, burning, otherworldly. That final shot, Bella's transformation, is one of the most iconic cliffhangers in young adult cinema. The music swells, her heartbeat fades, and then, silence, replaced by supernatural stillness. It's a promise that the story is far from over, and that everything we've seen so far has only been the beginning. For longtime fans, it's validation. For casual viewers, it's intrigue. And for everyone in between, it's impossible to look away. These critical moments, her wedding, the honeymoon revelation, the pregnancy, the emotional unraveling of Edward and Jacob, the childbirth, the transformation, are not just dramatic beats. They are emotionally rich, thematically daring choices that redefine what Twilight is capable of. They elevate Breaking Dawn Part 1 from melodrama into myth. Critics at the time were split, but many praised the film's willingness to embrace its weirdness. Roger Ebert noted the insane audacity of the birth sequence. Others applauded Kristen Stewart's fearless performance, while some dismissed the film's pacing and tonal shifts. But one thing is undeniable: it sparked conversation. And isn't that what the best films do? Audiences responded with fervor. Screenings erupted in gasps and tears during Bella's death scene. The wedding prompted real-life ceremonies modeled after it. Feathers became symbolic icons of the saga. And Renesmee's name, despite its polarizing reception, entered the cultural lexicon. The reactions were passionate because the film asked for passion. It refused to play safe. It dared to disturb, to move, to shock. Even now, more than a decade later, Breaking Dawn Part 1 stands as the Twilight film that dared to peel back the fantasy and explore what lies beneath. Love, sacrifice, change, fear, control, mortality. It's all there, wrapped in supernatural silk but unmistakably human at its core. It is these moments, the bold, strange, beautiful ones, that make the film unforgettable. While the Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn Part 1 swept audiences into a world of supernatural passion and looming dread, much of its cinematic spell was crafted in the quiet chaos behind the scenes, where creative ambition, technical experimentation, and emotional storytelling all collided to shape a film unlike anything the series had yet attempted. For the fourth installment of this cultural juggernaut, the production team found themselves walking a delicate tightrope, adapting the most controversial and structurally complex book in the franchise while maturing its visual language and deepening its emotional gravity. And that balancing act began long before cameras rolled, with the decision to split Stephenie Meyer's final novel into 2 films. This was not merely a financial move, though the box office would certainly justify it. Creatively, the story demanded room to breathe. The first half of Breaking Dawn isn't your typical action-driven narrative. It's a descent. A slow, psychological unraveling that pivots from fairy tale to body horror within the span of 2 hours. The split allowed director Bill Condon, a filmmaker with a background in emotionally charged dramas and musicals, to linger on these moments, to savor the tension rather than rush through it. And it was Condon's appointment as director that signaled a tonal evolution. With films like Gods and Monsters and Dreamgirls under his belt, Condon brought a theatrical elegance and a deep sensitivity to character that elevated the film's intimate moments into cinematic poetry. Nowhere was this more evident than in the wedding sequence, which was one of the first scenes shot, and one of the most logistically daunting. Filmed in Squamish, British Columbia, the crew had to transform a remote forest into an ethereal, dreamlike venue that still felt grounded in the Cullen family's refined aesthetic. Production designer Richard Sherman and his team constructed an elaborate set deep in the woods, weaving in 160,000 wisteria blooms and hand-built benches into a site that had to look untouched by humans and yet impossibly elegant. The soft lighting, which seems to glow naturally from the forest itself, was the result of intricate planning, achieved using diffused daylight and a carefully concealed lighting rig suspended above the canopy. Every detail was deliberate, from the flower arch Edward waits beneath to the textural stitching of Bella's gown. And speaking of the gown, Carolina Herrera's design became an overnight sensation. Only a handful of people were allowed to see the dress before the scene was shot, and it was kept under tight wraps with NDAs and a specialized transportation plan. It wasn't just a dress. It was a plot point, a symbol, a character moment, and Herrera captured that duality by merging vintage lace with modern minimalism, giving Bella a look that was both classic and hauntingly forward-facing, like a ghost from the future. But even the romantic splendor of the wedding couldn't shield the crew from the grueling pace of production. Unlike the first 3 films, Breaking Dawn Part 1 was shot back-to-back with Part 2, resulting in a 6-month shoot that saw the cast and crew hopping between Brazil, Vancouver, and Baton Rouge. The shoot was relentless. Locations had to be redressed overnight. Scenes were shot out of order. Kristen Stewart would film Bella's deathly emaciated scenes in the morning and bounce back to shoot honeymoon sequences in the afternoon. The Brazil shoot in particular, set on Isle Esme, Edward and Bella's tropical honeymoon destination, was both stunning and logistically nightmarish. Filming in Parody, a remote coastal town surrounded by jungle and ocean, meant that equipment had to be transported by boat, and weather delays were constant. Mosquitoes, humidity, and shifting tides wreaked havoc on schedules. The beach scenes that appear warm and serene on screen were often filmed under gray skies, with the crew using bounce boards and digital grating to simulate sunshine. Even the moonlight that filters into the bedroom during the infamous headboard-breaking scene was a massive lighting rig hovering just off the roof, mimicking lunar light with carefully softened intensity. And then came the baby bump. One of the film's most unique challenges was visualizing Bella's pregnancy, which accelerates at a supernatural pace. The production had to depict her progression from glowing newlywed to near-death without jarring the audience or making the transformation unintentionally comic. To achieve this, the visual effects team, led by VFX supervisor John Bruno, employed a combination of digital body mapping, prosthetics, and an emaciated CGI model layered over Kristen Stewart's performance. Stewart was filmed wearing a special silicone suit during the later pregnancy scenes, but her face remained untouched so her performance could shine through. Then, using a technique called digital skin replacement, her cheeks, collarbones, and limbs were digitally thinned, pulling in shadows and emphasizing bones without altering her expressiveness. The result was unsettling, and exactly what the filmmakers intended. Audiences recoiled at her appearance, and yet couldn't look away. Even more complex was the birth sequence, a nightmarish crescendo that walks the line between fantasy and body horror. Originally, the scene was shot with restraint, but the raw intensity of the moment demanded more. So they leaned in. The practical effects team designed a fully articulated animatronic dummy of Bella's body to simulate her near-death state. Blood tubes, motion rigs, and prosthetics were used to show her failing body, while Edward and Jacob try to save her. When Edward delivers the baby by biting through the amniotic sac, the sound design team crafted a crunching effect that was part celery, part leather, organic, yet monstrous. The final result wasn't just shocking, it was brutally honest. This wasn't magic, it was trauma. Birth, here, became a battleground between life and death. To capture the film's more intimate emotional textures, cinematographer Guillermo Navarro, best known for his work with Guillermo del Toro on Pan's Labyrinth, crafted a visual palette that evolved alongside Bella's journey. Early scenes are warm and romantic, with golden hues and soft contrasts. As the story darkens, the colors drain, shadows deepen. By the time Bella is bedridden, the world around her feels brittle and cold. Navarro's use of handheld shots during these moments adds a documentary-like immediacy, placing us uncomfortably close to her suffering. Another groundbreaking element? The CGI wolf pack. Though wolves had appeared in earlier films, Breaking Dawn Part 1 demanded more from its digital creatures than ever before. Not just as action set pieces, but as emotional characters. The pivotal telepathic conversation scene, where Jacob and Sam's pack clash over Bella's fate, required the animators to capture complex facial expressions and micro-reactions on creatures that still had to feel grounded in natural wolf behavior. To accomplish this, the animation team at Tippett Studio conducted motion studies using real wolves, then layered in subtle human features, eye movements, snarling lip curls, paw shifts. They even gave Jacob's wolf a slightly narrower muzzle and more amber-toned eyes to set him apart. Every blink, growl, and breath was choreographed. And yes, the scene's tone did divide fans, but technically, it was a leap forward for CGI performance. Even the music played a crucial role in emotionally anchoring the film. Composer Carter Burwell, returning after scoring the first Twilight film, brought an entirely new sensibility to this installment. His score for Breaking Dawn Part 1 weaves delicate piano motifs with swelling strings and ominous undertones. The wedding theme, later known as Love, Death, Birth, moved fans to tears and became one of the franchise's most beloved pieces. Burwell recorded the score with a full orchestra at Abbey Road Studios, and even incorporated subtle heartbeat sounds into Bella's transformation cue, syncing rhythmically with her final moments of mortality. And then there was Renesmee, though she appears for only a few moments, creating a baby that is not entirely human proved to be one of the most peculiar challenges in post-production. For the initial birth moment, a hyper-realistic animatronic baby, nicknamed Chucksmee by the crew, was built with a pale complexion and uncanny glassy eyes, but it was deemed too eerie even for Twilight. Ultimately, the team opted for a blend of real baby footage and CGI enhancements, particularly in the eye region, to make Renesmee appear more aware and genetically ethereal. Her presence, even in those fleeting shots, had to hint at the future, that this was no ordinary child. Perhaps what makes Breaking Dawn Part 1 such a standout from a production standpoint isn't any single innovation, but how fearlessly it leaned into the strange. It didn't shy away from its weirdest elements. It embraced them. Director Bill Condon once described the film as a romance that mutates into horror, then emerges again as myth. And the technical choices reflect that transformation. From makeup to prosthetics, sound design to score, every department worked in sync to bring an impossible story to life. And it paid off. The film became a box office juggernaut, but more than that, it earned its place in the evolving legacy of fantasy cinema. It showed that a film aimed at a young adult audience could still be daring, uncomfortable, beautiful, and bold. As fans remember Bella's golden eyes opening in that final shot, they may not think about the digital grading, the body scans, or the animatronic dummy under the sheets. But all of it mattered. All of it made that transformation feel real. Because the magic of Breaking Dawn Part 1 wasn't just in what was seen. It was in what was crafted, in silence, behind the camera, by a team that believed the strange love story deserved nothing less than total cinematic devotion. As the Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn Part 1 opens with the quiet unfolding of wedding invitations and the tender hush of piano keys. It doesn't just signal the continuation of a love story. It begins a meditation on transformation, mortality, and the irreversible thresholds we all face. At its core, this chapter in the saga isn't about vampires or werewolves or fantasy at all. It's about choice, about sacrifice, and about the powerful evolution of identity through the prism of love, suffering, and rebirth. Beneath the swoon-worthy gazes and supernatural drama lies a tapestry of thematic depth, layered symbolism, and rich commentary on life, death, and womanhood in all its extremes. The first and most visually apparent theme is transformation, not just physical but existential. From the moment Bella walks toward Edward in her wedding dress, there's an unspoken understanding that this isn't just the beginning of a marriage. It's the end of who she was. The entire film orbits around her metamorphosis, not as an instant change, but as a process filled with pain, conflict, and, ultimately, transcendence. Her decision to keep her child, against all medical and supernatural advice, reflects not stubbornness, but autonomy. Bella reclaims control over her body and her future in a way that challenges both patriarchal expectations and supernatural tradition. She chooses a path that no one, not even Edward or Jacob, can fully comprehend, and in doing so, she evolves from a passive girl defined by love into a powerful agent of her own fate. This journey is deeply symbolic, and the film reinforces that visually. As Bella's pregnancy advances, her physical decline becomes almost religious in tone. The house darkens, the camera lingers on her sunken cheeks and fragile bones, echoing images of martyrdom or saintly suffering. In a narrative sense, Bella becomes a vessel literally carrying the next generation of supernatural beings, but symbolically embodying the struggle between old life and new, human frailty and immortal strength. The pain she endures becomes a rite of passage, a purification, and when she dies, only to rise again with burning red eyes, the imagery is unmistakably resurrection. It's the vampire version of a phoenix myth, born not from fire, but from sacrifice and blood. The juxtaposition between birth and death fuels another central theme, the duality of nature. Breaking Dawn Part 1 is constantly navigating the space between beauty and horror, light and darkness, the sacred and the profane. The wedding sequence, lush and filled with life, sits in stark contrast to the sterile terror of the birth scene. Edward and Bella's honeymoon glows with sensual warmth, while her body later turns cold and brittle, collapsing under the strain of supernatural pregnancy. This oscillation isn't accidental, it's meant to unsettle, to force us, as viewers, to confront how love and violence often coexist in myth and in life. That sense of duality also extends to the supernatural world the characters inhabit. Vampires, usually portrayed as monstrous or seductive killers in traditional lore, are domesticated here, but only to a point. The Cullens live ethically, avoiding human blood, upholding a kind of vegetarian moral code. But they are still predators by nature, and the film doesn't let us forget that. The contrast between their civility and their instinct underscores the film's exploration of restraint versus instinct, civilization versus primality. Edward, in particular, is constantly at war with what he is and what he wants to be. His reluctance to sleep with Bella on their honeymoon, his terror at harming her. It all stems from that inner struggle between his vampiric hunger and his moral self. He is love and danger wrapped in one, and his presence reinforces the film's meditation on the cost of desire. Desire itself becomes a battleground, not just for Edward and Bella, but for every major character. Jacob, torn between loyalty, love, and rage, grapples with the impossibility of Bella's choices. His transformation into a protector, even of the child he once saw as an abomination, becomes a symbol of growth through heartbreak. He represents the painful reality that sometimes love means stepping back, even when every instinct demands otherwise. His imprinting on Renesmee, deeply controversial among fans, is, from a symbolic lens, less about romance and more about fate, about binding oneself to something greater than ego or expectation. Through these emotional dynamics, the film quietly explores themes of power and control, especially within the constructs of gender and family. Bella's pregnancy is more than a narrative twist. It's a battleground for competing ideologies. Edward wants to save her, the Cullens want to reason with her, and the wolves want to destroy the threat. But Bella insists on her right to choose, and in doing so, the film engages, consciously or not, with real-world conversations about bodily autonomy, maternal identity, and the fierce politics of choice. This is where the fantasy framework becomes a vessel for social commentary. Within the confines of a YA romance, we witness a woman refuse to surrender her agency, even as her body breaks beneath the weight of her decision. It's not a clean or easy statement, and it doesn't pretend to be, but it reflects the complexities that so many women face, particularly in societies where pregnancy can still feel like a war zone of expectation, sacrifice, and silence. Then there's the house itself, the Cullen residence, which becomes a symbolic haven and prison. Its clean lines, massive windows, and natural surroundings reflect their aspirational humanity, their desire to live in harmony with the world around them. But as Bella's condition worsens, the house begins to close in. Curtains are drawn, lights dim. The forest that once felt like freedom becomes a border. It mirrors her entrapment within her own body, her journey inward. By the time the wolves circle the property, the house becomes a fortress, an echo of the womb of protection, but also of entrapment and isolation. Nature, in fact, plays a quiet but powerful role in the symbolic language of the film. Water, in particular, is used with striking intentionality. Bella and Edward's first night together occurs in the water, under moonlight, a place of cleansing, vulnerability, and union. But water later becomes dangerous, overwhelming. When Bella sees her reflection distorted in a mirror, when her body is ravaged by the pregnancy, it no longer soothes, it drowns. The ocean becomes both sanctuary and threat, mirroring her shifting identity. Fire, too, plays a subtle role. It's in the crackling of the fireplace during key confrontations, in the burning transformation of Bella's blood. Fire is change, death, and renewal all at once. Even the concept of family takes on thematic weight. Breaking Dawn Part 1 challenges traditional definitions. The Cullens are not bound by blood, but by choice. Their loyalty to Bella, even when it risks war with the wolves, speaks to the idea that family is forged through love, not biology. The werewolf pack, by contrast, operates on strict codes of hierarchy and instinct, suggesting that family without freedom becomes tyranny. When Jacob breaks from Sam, it's a metaphor for individual conscience overpowering tribal loyalty. He forms his own pack with Seth and Leah, representing a new kind of chosen family, one driven by empathy, not obligation. The wedding itself is perhaps the film's most overt symbolic event. It marks a culmination, yes, but also a final goodbye. Charlie's bittersweet toast, Bella's slow walk toward Edward, the exchanging of vows. All of it feels loaded with finality. It's not just a marriage, it's a funeral for her former life, And it's no accident that her transformation later echoes this moment. She wears white again, she is reborn again. But this time, not as a bride, but as a vampire. The film cleverly bookends these two moments, showing how identity is both fluid and cyclical. Religion, too, hovers in the background, not as doctrine but as motif. The imagery of sacrifice, of blood, of resurrection. It all evokes religious undertones. Edward's guilt over damning Bella reflects a spiritual crisis. Rosalie's fierce protection of the unborn child is driven by her own loss, her own unattained motherhood, hinting at redemption. And when Bella finally opens her crimson eyes, there's a strange serenity to it, a peace, as if she has found her heaven, even if it's the kind only a vampire could inhabit. Beneath all these layers, the film is ultimately asking, what are we willing to endure to become who we're meant to be? And how much of ourselves must we lose or fight to keep in the process? In Bella's journey, there is pain, yes, but also agency. In Edward's arc, there is hesitation, but also faith. And in Jacob's, there is grief, but also growth. These aren't simple arcs. They are painful, messy, and deeply human, despite the supernatural sheen. And that's the irony of Breaking Dawn Part 1. For all its vampires and wolves, its mystical pregnancies and telepathic wolves, it's one of the most grounded entries in the series. It's not a story about monsters. It's about people, about change, about the terrifying beauty of becoming. The social resonance of that message is part of what made the film so impactful. It struck a chord with audiences who saw in Bella not weakness, but strength forged through sacrifice. It stirred debates about gender, love, and the ownership of one's future. And it dared to tell a story where horror and romance could coexist, not as opposites, but as partners in the human experience. Breaking Dawn Part 1 may not shout its themes loudly, but in its silences, its shadows, and its most intimate moments, it speaks volumes. About transformation, about love, about the cost of rebirth. And in doing so, it etched itself into the hearts of viewers not just as a fantasy, but as a mirror held up to the difficult, beautiful, and sometimes terrifying choices we all must face. From the very first frame of the Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn Part 1, a certain stillness hangs in the air, quiet, contemplative, almost reverent. It's the kind of visual calm that hints at something seismic about to unfold. And director Bill Condon embraces this atmosphere with deliberate artistry. This isn't just another entry in a wildly successful franchise. It's a tonal shift, a more intimate, psychological installment, and the visual storytelling reflects that from beginning to end. In this chapter, the saga moves away from the overt spectacle of vampire-werewolf confrontations and instead leans into something deeper, something more cinematic, more intimate, more hauntingly beautiful. There's a new maturity to the film's visual palette, beginning with the lush wedding preparations and carrying through to the brutal intimacy of Bella's transformation. The cinematography, led by Guillermo Navarro, an Oscar-winning collaborator of Guillermo del Toro, leans heavily on naturalistic lighting, soft edges, and romantic tones. The wedding sequence is practically bathed in dream logic. A forest adorned with cascading white blossoms, subtle sunbeams breaking through tree canopies, and a gentle depth of field that makes it all feel like a waking dream. Navarro uses his lens to make the real feel mythical and the mythical feel tangible. He plays with contrasts, the white purity of Bella's dress against the deep greens of the woods, the warmth of the ceremony juxtaposed with the steely coldness of vampire skin. It's not just beautiful, it's deliberate. Every shot is composed like a painting, framing characters in moments of vulnerability or quiet contemplation. Take the overhead shots of Bella lying in bed during her pregnancy. They're distant, clinical even, slowly growing more intimate as her condition deteriorates. The camera becomes more of a participant than an observer, as if the visual language itself is drawing us closer, inviting us into the claustrophobia and urgency of her internal crisis. There's a sort of visual empathy at play. As Bella fades, so too does the saturation in the frame. The once lush colors of the island, the vibrancy of her honeymoon world, slowly give way to pale hues, muted browns, and ashen grays. The cinematography mirrors her fading life, her weakening grip on the human world. Then comes the editing, a crucial storytelling device here, because Breaking Dawn Part 1 is a film that lives in quiet moments, internal conflicts, and slowly building dread. Virginia Katz, the editor, exercises patience, allowing scenes to breathe. There's a notable absence of quick cuts in the first half of the film, especially during emotional beats. This choice lets the audience absorb Bella and Edward's relationship in real time. The way their touches linger, how glances turn into revelations. The wedding dance, for instance, is edited with elegance, lingering on Edward's subtle smiles, Jacob's pained gaze, and Bella's shifting emotions. These aren't just reactions. They're psychological cues, timed perfectly with the music to evoke unspoken emotion. As we bring this deep dive to a close, what lingers most is not a single scene or line of dialogue, but a feeling, a mood. The moment the music swells as Bella's transformation completes. The way the camera lingers on her stillness. The echo of silence before her eyes open and meet ours, burning red with new life. It's an image, a symbol, a promise, that even in death, there can be power. That change, no matter how painful, brings with it new beginnings. So whether you were a lifelong fan or discovering the saga for the first time, the Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn Part 1 offers something deeply human beneath the supernatural surface. It offers questions, choices, risks, and above all, a mirror to our own journeys of change. If you love this breakdown, give the video a thumbs up and subscribe for more deep dives into the world of cinema. Let's keep exploring movies together. Because every story, no matter how familiar, still has secrets waiting to be found. And every movie, when seen through the right lens, can awaken something extraordinary in us.